So they're within reach, I think, and there's an expectation here in the crowd. Lots of umbrellas out, I have to say, and can't blame people for that. It's not raining as heavily as it was earlier, but there's a vast crowd now gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and I'm just sensing a silence. I'm sensing an air of expectation, the solemnity. There's a tranquility to it, which is something you're not used to. I think we all know this, Robert, don't we, when we're normally here for the birthday parade or an event of celebration.
Or just changing the guard. I mean,
yes.
There's always a sense of sort of excitement, anticipation, commotion, and now there is this great solemnity. I think it's very touching. The Queen's coffin is just about, you mentioned her birthplace at Bruton Street, just up the road, and now that she's just going past the corner of Piccadilly where she grew up as a child, a home she loved, they all loved, the home they didn't really want to leave when it was time to move to Buckingham Palace, where of course she's about to arrive now.
My mother remembers early on when they had just taken on the role and they moved into Buckingham Palace, and she remembers coming here to the gardens where the Queen and Princess Margaret, my mother and her sister, would play horses. And the Queen was always the rider, Princess Margaret was always the horse. And she did also remember very early on when they went to see one of the films that Noel Coward was producing. It was based on my grandfather's war story of HMS Kelly, and they were on their way for an official screening, and my mother was in the car with the King and Queen, the two princesses, and Princess Elizabeth said to her younger sister, "Wave, you must wave at the crowd." So from a very early age, she was that person. She was the one to lead.
Well, that leadership manifested itself very clearly over a very long reign. Leadership often given in a very subtle way, in a very understated way, but one got the impression time and again that when a decision was made, that decision was very clear and was conveyed in a very firm way. It had been thought through, it was measured, but it was delivered and taken in a sometimes forceful way, but always a determined way. Here we have the flashing lights and the outriders approaching, I think, quite close to Marble Arch, unless they're now drawing down towards Wellington Arch. The crowd's building up, so getting closer and closer to Buckingham Palace itself.
It's remarkable, isn't it, the great variety of the British weather. We had the rainbows on Thursday, we had the sunshine in Edinburgh this morning and yesterday, and in the rain those lights just sparkling because of the weather, and even more brightly one can see that, especially designed, and again the visibility, even in death we can see the Royal Standard, we can see the Queen, we can see the coffin.
She would always make a point, even driving at night when she must have been terribly tired after some state occasion, she would always make sure the light was on in the car, not because she was a show-off at all, it's because she knew people had come out, they expected to see her. Visibility, I have to be seen to be believed.
It's the ancient tradition of monarchy, which is that you have to be seen.
And therefore the bright colours worn at Royal Ascot, for example, or at any Trooping the Colour at any official event.
It's extraordinary to think how much the world has changed in all terms. You were talking about technology. Again, I keep referencing my mother because she really is the one who was there so close to the Queen, especially when that moment she actually became Queen. And they needed to make their way back to England. And the world's press had already descended on Nairobi Airport by the time the then Princess Elizabeth arrived. And the world's press put their cameras on the floor, on the ground, as a sign of respect for the Queen in mourning, and no one took a photograph of her. Imagine now.
Well, I rather wish, I have to say, that tradition were being followed now, because I do think that there must be a respect. And it's not to blame people. I think so many people now have grown up with an iPhone attached to their hand, and that filming something makes it real. No, witnessing makes it real.
Well, I have to say in Edinburgh it was very firmly laid down there will be no iPhones and photography at the vigil of the Line in State, and I'm sure that'll be the same here.
And it was well, it was adhered to very
Oh yes,
faithfully.
everybody.
There was no
everyone behaved
issue at all.
impeccably. Yes.
No.
Just coming down Park Lane, coming up to Hyde Park Corner, I think.
So we can see a big police presence there as we come to the southern end of Park Lane, and very soon they'll be turning over to the left and then on the approach to Constitution Hill, the way down to the palace itself. Journey the Queen made probably thousands of times in her long life. And as we wait for the state hearse to come onto the final approach here to Buckingham Palace, we just reflect as well on the fact that we have family members inside the palace who are waiting. They're waiting for the arrival principally of their mother's body. This is Charles and Anne. Not sure, Robert, at this point where Duke of York or Earl of Wessex are, whether they're there as well. They may well be.
I think during the course of the evening, this is the family's last chance to have that private farewell. We would expect the family, obviously, to stand vigil in Westminster Hall, but tonight is the nearest. And yeah, of course, they're now in, I suppose, what you would call the home straight.
The final furlong. The Princess Royal obviously following behind. And that was a very moving statement, wasn't it, that was released from the Princess Royal at 7 o'clock?
Yes, heartfelt and timed in a very deliberate way for the return to London. Princess Royal waited. Here at Buckingham Palace, the outriders have just gone past. And there's silence here as the state hearse approaches. And Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II turns to Buckingham Palace one last time.
driver must be very thankful they've got there.
The final return to Buckingham Palace. The coffin of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has been brought back from Scotland, from Balmoral, flown from Edinburgh to London, driven from RAF Northolt to Buckingham Palace, where it will lie at rest overnight in the bow room of the palace, and then tomorrow afternoon will be taken in a formal procession, a state procession, from the palace to Westminster Hall, in the ancient precincts of the Palace of Westminster, where a body will lie in state for 4 days and nights until the state funeral takes place on Monday. And the vast crowd here, which has waited patiently in the rain and in the wind, rain has just about held off now, some people beginning to disperse, but lots of people cheering when the state hearse arrived. They just wanted to show their appreciation and their admiration. So while some stood in silence, others wanted to express a different emotion. And that is the nature of the event. That's the nature of what is going on. It's a mix of sadness, and it's a mix of gratitude and celebration too. So that is the scene at 7 minutes past 8 at Buckingham Palace. The King and the Queen Consort, other members of the royal family, are inside, and they are there to welcome back the body of Queen Elizabeth II, which will lie at rest overnight in their official residence in London. And there have been so many tributes published since the Queen's death that most of them from people, of course, who never met Her Majesty,
It's raining,
and yet
isn't it?
demonstrating the profound effect that she had on people's lives. But some of the most illuminating tributes, I have to say, including the Princess Royal tonight, have come from members of the Queen's close family, including her children.
There are various things that the Queen has managed to achieve over all those years. I think probably providing the stability and the continuity over that length of time has been, I think, an immensely important part of in a sense, what she's achieved.
There are so many different things that she contributed to, being head of the Commonwealth for so many years and helping to maintain its integrity. Her position helped, I think, so much to cement what is a truly astonishing association. And we've talked a lot, my mum and I, so that's always been a great help to me, to hear her perspective on what goes on.
I think the example that she had from her father, as well as her mother, was absolutely crucial to her understanding of what being a monarch actually meant. And it was really about service and her definition of service. And that was a lifetime, literally 24/7, 365 days of the year.
The job is about being interested in people, and the Queen had this extraordinary ability always to make you feel that you are the only person. We didn't see much of her during the day because of the duties, but in the evening, just the same as any other family, we would get together. I always remember holidays being very, very special.
There was a lot going on in those periods. partly because it included all the things that she enjoyed, and that included the countryside, the dogs, the horses, and just being out and about, and being able to get away a bit from that public gaze.
One of the greatest achievements I felt personally was her and my father's visit to Ireland.
Uach tí roin agus a coide.
Coming, you know, at the end of so many years, and after so much hurt and pain and difficulty, was a wonderfully healing, reconciling moment, which I think had a profound effect. I think more than anything else, you learn by example. For her, whatever she felt, or ever ill, or ever difficult or exhausted, she always went out and did what was required. And that does rub off, I think. And I shall never forget being with her, on those marvellous occasions. All those moments are so special.
As I was saying, some of the most illuminating tributes come from the close family, because of course it's not just a different perspective, but especially in the case of people who we don't hear from very often talking about the Queen in those terms. So it was just a very moving experience to be able to share some of those views. I'm joined by two more special guests, and I'm very grateful to them for coming on a night like this. We're joined by Baroness Scotland, thank you so much for coming in, and by the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for coming in too. Good to see you. Baroness Scotland, we've discussed in previous programmes, in happy times and less happy times, how you've engaged with the royal family, not least to do with Commonwealth. What does the Queen's death mean in terms of the way the Commonwealth sees itself? Because clearly, for so long, she was the undisputed figurehead. So what does this change represent?
Well, I think it's a very poignant moment for absolutely everyone. The whole Commonwealth is devastated. We in the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland tend to think of her as our Queen. But she wasn't just our Queen and the Queen of the realms. She was actually the Queen of the whole world. If you spoke about the Queen, everybody knew you were talking about Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
And the truth is, she has been almost omnipresent in the world's life for 70 years. First, when she was a beautiful and engaging young woman before she got married, then this magical marriage with Prince Philip, and then this extraordinary young woman at 25 became our Queen. And the total dedication that she has given her whole life. Do you remember when she was 21, when she said, it doesn't matter whether my life is going to be long or short, I will dedicate every day to your service. And that's what she did. So I think the whole Commonwealth is grieving, but also expressing love and devotion and appreciation and huge sympathy for King Charles. He has been with her on this journey for the Commonwealth. He was chosen by all the leaders in 2018 to be the next head of the Commonwealth. In part, I think, because he had emulated her love and affection, her devotion, and her duty. So I think there is so much pain, but also gladness and appreciation and respect.
The word duty is important, isn't it? And Sir Lindsay, in the very, I thought, dignified and touching event that was organised in Parliament, Westminster Hall, when you conveyed condolences of your fellow parliamentarians, and we can see some of the images here of the event itself. You were very clear in what you thought the Queen had brought to the role. What would you say to viewers tonight?
I've got to say, everybody will say the same. we knew no one else. She has been all of my lifetime. It is the lifetime of the people I represent within Chorley. And of course, it was that bringing together. Grief brings unity, but none more so than what Queen Elizabeth did to this. Not just the United Kingdom, the overseas territories and crown dependencies. This is about the world coming together, the Commonwealth, we're all at one. The grief is shared, and nobody could ever have thought. And we've watched her grow old, but there's always been that smile, that happiness, that radiance that came out right from, you think the silver smile from the Jubilee, right through to the platinum smile at the end. You never thought this would end, but all good things do come to an end. And I've got to say, if nothing else, it's brought us all together, and that's got to be a good thing. Out of bad must come good, and I think we've got it. We've got a new king, and the country are looking for leadership, and we will get that leadership. That's the one thing I'm absolutely sure of.
That's a very clear and positive message. Given that the role of the monarch in the system we have is sometimes a cause for debate. The issue with the Queen, I think, is that people felt that she really managed that very skillfully, and the hope is, of course, that will then continue. I'm assuming that hope is shared very fervently.
It's got to be seamless, hasn't it? The transfer will be seamless. We've already seen that. The dignity that's already been shown. But the respect that came from both houses was very, very clear. Here is a new king. And I've got to say, without doubt, when I was speaking to peers and to MPs and everybody around, this brought us together. And there is great belief in the future. And I think, in fairness, this is a king who has decided to set out from day one to make sure the appeal's there, to reflect to everybody what his views and how he will do this job. He has stepped up. But I've got to say, it must have been the longest apprenticeship in history.
Yes.
So, no, he's got it right.
Yes.
He's absolutely nailed it well. And it's that feeling that, yes, the sadness is there, we've lost our queen, but we've now got a king. And like everything, it will move on. And we've seen that dignity already. And we will see more of that as it goes around the United Kingdom. And it goes around the Commonwealth at some point. This is a clear message. He is here to stay, and we will be well represented. That I am absolutely sure of.
You share that optimism?
I do, absolutely. I think Lindsay has said it very, very well, because the Queen is irreplaceable. She is one in 1,000 years, not just in 70. But look at what she left us, and the dignity that she's shown. You spoke earlier, Hugh, about the fact that she learnt at her father's knee, and she emulated him and respected him and loved him. But look at what has happened with King Charles. He too has learnt at his mother's knee. She has been with him for this whole 73 years, a major influence in his life. And he has suffered a huge loss. We're all grieving now because the Queen was in our drawing room, she was on the television, we looked forward for her every Christmas message. But he had her every day of his life. So I think this is a huge continuity, and they say the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, and he had two great parents, because Prince Philip was a remarkable man, and our beloved late Queen was an extraordinary woman.
Thank you so much, both of you, Baroness Scotland, Sir Lindsay Hall, Mr. Speaker. Good to have you with us. Thank you very much. Well, we mentioned, of course, the event there at Westminster Hall, but of course today's been a very busy day because the King and the Queen Consort were visiting Northern Ireland. So let's join my colleague Mark Simpson, who's there for us tonight.